So let's start with the fixed equity splits. If you remember, the 2 points important for your equity split to actually help your team instead of the other way around, it's fairness and it's future-proofing. So please, let's keep that in mind and let's look on what are fixed equity splits. So fixed equity splits fix founders' share at certain point in time. And typically that point in time is at the moment, latest at the moment when you decide to incorporate your company. Because that's when you need to say to the commercial register, this is a company and these are the shareholders and this is how much of the company each of the shareholders has. So it's a very common industry standard, and if you are already putting together your co-founders team, your co-founders will be familiar with it. If you are already speaking to potential investors, your investors will be familiar with it, and your lawyers and accountants as well. So everyone knows. However, it has one big challenge, and that is, where do we start? So let's say this is our timeline, your timeline. So somewhere on this timeline, you had an idea, right? Idea. After the idea, you were thinking about your team. Who are the people that can help you to execute with this idea? So here, you put together a team. And you developed your prototype, your minimum viable product or service, as it could be. And you also tested it with your customers. Do they like it? And the answer was yes, they do. So you decided you are going to go on with the idea. And somewhere here is the moment when your company is profitable, successful, and all happy. Now, on this timeline, it looks exactly like in our minds. This is the big stuff that already happened. And here is, well, relatively short part until the company becomes profitable. But in reality, it's a very important part. But the moment that you need to fix your equity, it's typically somewhere here. If you here decided to incorporate company, this is when you need to decide who gets how much of that pie. So let's get started. And I'd like you to meet the team of Bikers Heaven. So we have Eve, Adam, and Chloe. So Eve has an idea for a marketplace for bicycles. And she has been working on the idea for the last 6 months. She has the business plan. She even has the prototype already, which is the prototype of the platform. And she has the customer validation finished. So quite a few milestones. And she decided that she would like Adam to join as a sales superman and potentially also as an initial investor. And she would also like Chloe to join because Chloe is really numbers wizard. So she'd like Chloe to be the CFO and again, potentially a huge task ahead, maybe raise additional investment. So we have Eve, we have Adam, and we have Chloe. So let's have a look. This is Bikers Heaven. And Bikers Heaven pie is undivided as now. And we have Eva, who is the founder with the idea. We have Adam, who will be responsible for sales. And we have Chloe, who should do, well, CFO and raise some additional investment. So what could they do? Now, option 1 is they can each get 1/3, right? 33% each. Let's think about it. Well, but Eva is actually going to work 100% and she already did work for 6 months on the project. Adam is only joining 50% and Chloe maybe 20 in the beginning, not more. So does this sound right? Well, maybe not. What else can we think of? Well, so for example, if it was Eva's idea, should Eva perhaps get majority and keep 75% of the pie and just split the remaining 25 between Adam and Chloe? Well, it is definitely one option, but will they be motivated? So if we need to think about something else, so how about Eva keeps 50% and the rest will be split between Adam and Chloe? Do you see my point? All of these options are theoretically possible. Remember Bikers team, what was their first option? Just not to go too much into detail, and let's give everyone 1/3. So the next big fat question is equal or unequal equity splits. What do you think? So opinions wildly differ. I'm sorry to say there is not one universal answer. In my experience though, the equity should reflect the contribution of the founders. So if we think again back to Bikers Heaven, we had Eve, who was working on the product already for 6 months, and she achieved some significant milestones, and she's gonna be 100% in from the beginning. Then we have Adam, who is very important, because if you don't sell your product, you don't have business, but in the beginning he can only join for 50%. But on the other hand, he's also bringing the first cash. How much? And then we have Chloe, who is going to be very important ahead, because maybe if she raises the investment, the company could scale much quicker. But in the beginning, she's only there for 20%. So would the 1/3 for each of them actually reflect their contributions? Question, maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. Now, one thing that I would like to mention about the equal equity splits, it's also, it matters where you are from, because it's very culturally conditioned. So a lot of the founders that I work with in the Nordics, for them there is no other answer than equal equity splits, because it's very culturally acceptable, and that's the way there. The more you move away, the more the principle that the equity should mirror the contribution, it's getting stronger, okay? So if we think of unequal equity split, the option 2, if you remember, right? So should Eve take 75% or maybe half because she was first and then started? And that's where it can get very subjective, right? So typical premiums that you would think of as a founder to guarantee more than the other founders would be roles, right? So a CEO could say, I should get 10% more because I'm the CEO of the business. Now, you know what is the potential challenge with that? The journey that you have ahead, the timeline that we painted, right? It's a very different road. In the beginning, it's a rocky path, right? You might not even need a car, you maybe need a bicycle, and you need a very good mountain biker. Now, as the business matures, the rocky path changes into more smooth path, but it's still not a road. And different driving skills are required. And then we go and the company raised investment and has 1,000 paying users, and it needs to scale, maybe expand, right? Geographically, it's a road. There is a road ahead and you have a car. So the driving skills which are needed for the rocky path in the beginning to the highway layout later on are very different. Which is why we actually know very few companies who had the same CEO from the start up until the company growing and becoming very successful. We know them, there are some of them, right? Steve Jobs, well, I don't know if we can count him because he was also fired from Apple at some point. Jeff Bezos, another one of them. We know them because they are such an exception, not because they are the rule, right? So back to the role. You give 10% of the equity to the starting CEO. 2 years later, the company might need a completely different CEO. So is it fair, back to our principle of fairness, that the starting CEO who was in the company for a crucial 2 years, but hopefully that's just a short part of existence of the company, has 10%? Question. Another typical premium is the idea guy or girl, right? So it was my idea, so I want to have extra 30% of the business. So to a little bit calm your enthusiasm in case you are the founder with the idea, right? The typical idea premium would be between 5 to 10%. And again, the more serial entrepreneurs and investors become, the more they will tell you that there are plenty of good ideas, but what matters is the execution, right? So again, it's a question whether the idea should command an equity premium. What ranks fairly high as well, it's previous startup experience, because people who already have the experience of building a successful business have a high chance that they will repeat it, and they have also a very high chance that they learned a lot of the mistakes that there are to learn as an entrepreneur. So there are some premiums being allocated to people with premium startups experience. Cash contributions, big one, right? 50 years ago, before startups, cash contribution would actually be the only thing that would be looked at between founders in terms of allocation of the ownership. However, now depends very much which type of business you are building, but if you are investing 100% of your time and not taking salary out of the business, you are actually investing the most valuable resource. You're investing your time. So only looking on the cash contributions, I would not recommend. But also looking at the cash contributions, it's actually very fair, right? Because the cash helps the business to grow. Then we have industry expertise. Again, if you are coming from the industry where the business is aiming, you might have a very valuable network, which could be important for customers, suppliers, or maybe investors. On the other hand, we have quite a few examples of very successful businesses that were started by the people outside of the industry. Think Airbnb or Uber as the typical examples. They were so successful because they actually they did not know, or maybe they did, but they actually decided to do things differently than it was done in the industry. So if you think about equity premium for industry expertise, think more in the value of the network access, not maybe necessarily as the industry expertise. I would also like to tell you about an option of automatic equity calculators, right? So you go on Google, you type automatic equity calculator, and you get quite a few tools that look very helpful because that will help you with where to get started. But I would like to warn you actually there, because it depends on which type of business you are. So for a biotech or science-driven startups, the intellectual property is much more valuable. If you think of tech startup, the technology will be much more valuable. And if you think of a consumer product, it's the marketing, it's the sales, it's the business development. And when I tested the automatic equity calculators, they are very much biased towards from which industry they are coming from. So if you want to use them, maybe it's not a bad idea for a starting point, but make sure that the weight allocated to the different skills, that it fits your business. So moving on. One thing that founders actually have as a potential trap, again, think back please on the timeline that we painted, yeah? The long time between your idea until the business starts being profitable. Maybe it doesn't have to be even so long, but there are many things that actually need to happen, right? So what is the past bias? It's something that, again, Professor Noam Wasserman speaks in his research, and it's that the contributions up to the point of when you are splitting the equity tend to be overestimated. So think of the tech guy who developed the first prototype having 50% of the business and almost no equity being left for the sales and marketing people. Very similar thing, by the way, happens with the budgets as well, right? The company focuses on the product or service development and doesn't think then about, how to sell it. But if we focus on our equity split, so the people who are there from the beginning, and again, idea or product development, they tend to get more because that's stuff that was already delivered. But between now and the point that the company is profitable, there is still a lot of things that need to happen. So you need to think of the founders and of the people that will be helping you with that point as well. right? So just keep in mind all what will be needed until your business becomes fully profitable. Remember the journey. So your biggest challenge as a founder who wants to be fair, because again, majority of the founders that I happen to work with, they are not evil people. They don't want to take advantage of each other. There will be some exceptions. Most of them, they just want to do the right thing, also with respect to their team. But the biggest challenge that you have as a founder when you are considering the fixed equity split, it's the uncertainty ahead. It's by the time you need to split your equity, it's based on the assumption about the future. And we all know that, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans, right? So you need to base the split on the equity. You need to make it based on the assumption about the future. How much do you think each of your team members will still deliver? And you also need to do it fairly early on in the process. So how can we fix it? Let's talk vesting. Did you ever hear the term vesting? If you are in the startup scene for a while, chances are you did. If you're not, let's demystify this big complicated term. So what is vesting? Let's have a look. Vesting basically says that the founders get the full right to their share stakes based on certain conditions. It's as simple as that. However, it only partially helps with the limitations of the fixed equity splits, which we will explain in the next section. So let's simplify and explain the time-based vesting. So we have a founder who got promised 4,000 shares over 4 years. Typical vesting period, time-based, would be actually between 2 to 4 years. So we have 4 years, and here we have 4,000 shares. And our typical time-based vesting schedule would actually say that the founder in the first year will get the right for his 1,000 share. In the second year, he will get the right for 2,000 shares, and so on. You get the point. So with each year, up until year 4, when he has the full shares as promised. Now, what you can also consider doing in the beginning, and think in a comparison of an employment period. If you apply for a job, there is a probation period, and the purpose of the probation period is for both you and the company to figure out whether you are right for each other. So something similar you can do as a founder with so-called cliffs. And in this example, we will make a cliff of 12 months, the first year. So what you actually say with the cliff, that the founder who gets promised the 4,000 shares will only get the first 1,000 at the end of year 1. So if in this period, for whatever reason, either the company or the founder decides that they are not the right fit for each other, there is no equity allocated. It only happens at the year 1. But if you think with me about what could potentially be a trouble with time-based vesting, it's actually the time itself, because the time itself might not be the best proxy for value created. So just because the founder shows up here does not mean that he is creating the value that your company needs.